Hello, my name is Krish, and my AP Enviro project is on a unique species of shark that we know very little about. The family of sharks called Alopiidae, or thresher sharks. The question that I will be addressing is how do thresher sharks reproduce, and why should we care about protecting them? So, the oceans often work like a well-oiled machine, a machine that is so important that it fuels the human race globally. People often don't realize how much we take from the ocean. We use it for global transport, food, protection, and so much more. Unfortunately, we as humans have not returned the ocean's good fortunes. We have made many more negative impacts, such as pollution, global warming, and overfishing, than positive impacts. This leads to a pretty big imbalance between the relationship of the oceans and humanity. Admittedly, it's hard to grasp how detrimental humanity has been on the ocean because of the sheer size of the ocean. However, if we shift our focus to only one animal that has been consistently harassed by humans, we can put the bigger impacts into perspective. So where do sharks fit in? Sharks are almost like the government of the oceans. They keep populations in check, provide food for other scavengers, and some species will even distribute territory to other organisms on coral reefs. They are the top of the oceanic food chain and are heavily involved in making sure the oceans are in harmony with their many inhabitants. There are many different classifications of sharks, but the one that the focus will be on today is lambdiforms, or mackerel sharks. Mackerel sharks are large migratory sharks that can be identified by their two dorsal fins, one prominent one and one that's smaller and farther back, and their trademark pitch black eyes that lack a nictitating membrane, which is a third eyelid per se. Because these species are so largely migratory and are open ocean dwellers, we don't know much about their reproductive traits, other than that males will leave mating scars, or large scrapes and cuts on the outsides of females' bodies, as a way of holding on while mating. Most mackerel sharks, additionally, will participate in live birth rather than using eggs. Mating scars are one way to discern between males and females, and an additional way is to tell by looking at the underside of the shark. If there are two appendages, called claspers, coming out from underneath the pectoral fins, then it is a male, as you can see up here in this first photo. If there are no claspers, and there's a single slit underneath the pectoral fins, then the shark is a female. Using this information, we can discern that this shark in the top right photo, over here, is a male, while the shark on the bottom is a female. As you can see, there's no pectoral fins, or clasp. Well, there's pectoral fins, sorry, but there's no claspers here. It is important to distinguish between the two when studying these creatures because females would likely take research priority over the males, as the research team, or the theoretical research team, would want to track them specifically to their mating grounds and birthing sanctuaries. Unfortunately, sharks are consistently on the decline in population for a number of reasons. While some scholars may believe that the reason for shark decline is loss of territory, a more accurate claim would be that it is the constant and overwhelming force that is overfishing. Overfishing has consistently plagued our oceans for years on end now, and we are seeing serious consequences because of it. Sharks, either caught for their fins or caught up our nets, are killed at an alarming rate. It is estimated that 100 million sharks are killed per year. Lamiforms house some of the most endangered families, and for this presentation and research proposal, we will be focusing on the Alopiidae family. So, who are the Alopiidae? The Alopiidae are a unique family of lamiforms that have a neat evolutionary trait. All members have an elongated tail that they thrash around through the water to stun and kill their prey. Hence their common name, thresher sharks. There are 3 species of thresher in the Alopiidae family, but we will only be focusing on Alopias superciliosus, or commonly known as the big-eye thresher. The reason to focus on just one species is because this species, or Alopias superciliosus, is the biggest and most ecologically important. They are responsible for an estimated 43% of the thresher population according to the International Union for Conservation of Nature, or the IUCN, and are also responsible for keeping bait fish and invasive marine fish species in check. Because they are arguably the most important, as well as the most accessible species of Alopiidae, the research team will focus specifically on them. So, over the years, big-eye threshers have seen a massive decrease in their numbers. Since they are open ocean sharks, they are often caught up in fishing nets by boats trawling through their gatherings of bait fish, or the thresher's main source of food. Furthermore, their distribution has decreased exponentially in the past 30 years, going from being found in almost every single ocean to being almost purely restricted to the Pacific, Atlantic, and Indian Oceans. In the event that fishermen do decide to go after big-eye threshers, they are not actually killing them for their meat. Instead, they are hunted for their skin, often made into bags, purses, and boots. This has caused the big-eye threshers to be on the verge of extinction. And with overfishing rates gradually rising, the IUCN has made an estimate that 2055 is the year that thresher shark population could fall beyond saving. If we take a look here at figure 1 in the top right corner, we can see the abundance index, which is a relative measurement of population based off the standard unit of fishing effort. It's confusing, I know. Anyway, the figure shows the abundance index for thresher sharks from 1995 to 2010. And as you can see, the population is already low, averaging about 0.20 on the scale. Since then, it has only decreased. In figure 2, you can see the projected abundance of the sharks. There is a massive decrease here if we extend the chart. And we can see, if we extend the chart a bit farther, we could even see the exact year that threshers are estimated to go extinct, or in this case, 2055. So now that you're familiar with the Alopiidae family and the situation that they're facing, why would researchers, or this theoretical research team, go through so much trouble to study the reproductive habits? Before we delve too deep into why, we must accept that focusing on reproduction in these sharks poses many problems, and the biggest problem being that we have very little information about how lamniforms reproduce as a whole. What we do know is that shark reproduction is something that migratory sharks will swim towards all year round, although we still have no idea where each and every species establishes its mating grounds. Since mackerel sharks cover so much open ocean, tracking them to their mating locations is near impossible, as these sharks can reach places where we can't yet follow them, which means that conservation efforts are hard to maintain. So, how can you help a species that you only see once or twice every 4 months? One solution is to establish official sanctuaries for lamniforms. Globally, there are only 17 official marine sanctuaries to date, and none of them include protection for large mackerel sharks. Establishing a sanctuary for these sharks, even temporarily, would give us what we need to study these sharks, tagging these sharks, and doing extensive long-term research on these sharks in these sanctuaries. So, using what we know from previous research on threshers and our newfound love for shark sanctuaries, our research team could potentially set up temporary sanctuaries for sharks on their various feeding spots. Once those sanctuaries are established, sharks can be tagged and tracked to the additional hotspots. This map shows a rough estimate of lamniforms' migration patterns, and as you can see, there's one that spans across North America, Europe, and Eastern Asia over here, and then one that touches the tips of South America, Africa, and Australia. The Alopiidae family are known for preferring warmer water than colder waters. Using this information, the research team would choose 3 different spots on the southern migration trail set up by the tagging system. Using the baitfish running through this channel as our guide, each thresher shark would be caught, tagged, and recorded. The goal would be to tag as many sharks as possible in the first spot. This could be anywhere between 100 and 200 sharks. However, a goal of 200 might not be able to happen with the current population numbers. At the second spot, tagging would continue with the addition of acoustic buoys being deployed. The use of acoustic tags and buoys would not only give the research team a more accurate interpretation of where the sharks are headed and what they're looking for. Acoustic tags last for around 10 years before becoming inaccurate. So the use of these tags would provide a much more accurate and plausible long-term plan. As the research team moves to the third spot, they would continue to lay out an array of acoustic buoys to track the sharks with as much precision as possible. The final tagging area would be at the end of the channel. This is where additional data would be collected and last-minute tagging will happen. The third spot is also to look for any signs of mating, new scars, pregnant females, or paired-up sharks. These are all signs that the sharks are either getting ready to mate or getting ready to give birth. Tagging any sharks that haven't been tagged already here is essential to the success of the research. After the final spot is researched, after the final part is reached, the team would track back to the first spot and lay out additional acoustic buoys to cover as much water as possible. So, while this research that is being conducted is incredibly important and it's needed, there are a few major complications that could affect the results of the project. First off, there is a lot of water that needs to be protected and covered. A full round trip from point A to C is roughly 11,000 kilometers of water. To put that into perspective, the distance from Maine to California is only about 4,000 kilometers. This is a lot of water. However, this problem can be somewhat amended by splitting up the distance into 4 points, which would allow the research team to rest longer and cover a shorter distance of water between rest stops. And admittedly, this is a very grueling task to pose to a team of researchers, but this plan can be edited and changed for the health and safety of any potential researchers. Using a research vessel that travels at the average speed of 11 knots, the full 11-kilometer journey would take around 22 days without stopping. Fortunately, the research vessels are equipped to spend months on end at sea. And with the 4-point rest stop plan to restock, the journey is quite plausible. However, acquiring research vessels and the required research, such as tags and buoys, is very cost-heavy. An 160-foot research vessel costs about $11.5 million to construct, and then equipping it with the necessary equipment would then take another $500,000. Then, each acoustic tags cost about $1,500 to make. 600 tags would be needed on the research trip, which is another $1 million. 32 acoustic buoys are needed to cover the channel, each costing approximately $10,000 to make. So in all, $12 million for the research vessel and necessary survival supplies, another $1 million for the tags, and $320,000 for buoys. In all, that's about $13.3 million. Luckily, the research vessel does not need to be built nor bought. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has a fleet of research ships ready for use. Subtracting $11.5 million from the equation leaves the total cost of the expedition at $1.8 million. The NOAA has a yearly budget of about $20 million. While this is relatively small for government, this budget is relatively small for government administration, the project is still very cost efficient under this budget. Another complication would be the time it takes to complete the project. In a similar study to this, one team of research spent a total of 60 years searching for answers involving the Greenland shark, another large species that is located, you guessed it, in Greenland. However, for specific research on threshers, it would not take this long to get a definitive answer to our questions. An estimated 20-year expedition, with both reproductive and conservation questions, would have either been answered or would have a solid plan to move forward on. In the end, there are a lot of complications at first glance. However, each of these problems can be solved with relative ease and comfort. So, now that we've laid out exactly what a good theoretical plan would look like, and how to achieve it, has something similar ever been done besides the Greenland shark one? The short answer is yes. An experiment done for the Marine Ecology Progress series in 2010 was a semi-long-term research project that was dedicated to the study of threshers. Over the course of 5 years, our research team tracked a total of 7 juvenile sharks over the California Bight, which is a large continental shelf and a rumored shark nursery. Through the use of acoustic tags and a boat hooked up with a receiver, the team tracked shark movements day by day, following even one shark for about 140 kilometers before the tag was accidentally knocked off. As you can see in each of the figures, the sharks tend to stay within the shaded area, which represents the continental shelf. The reasoning behind this can be attributed to the difference in nutrients between open ocean, or the white of the figures, and the continental shelf. Shelves, such as the California Bight, usually have upwells around them. Nutrients brought up from the deep ocean in an upwell provide the surrounding area with plenty of life, which could easily house and nurse sharks to their adult forms. So, the results of this experiment back up the reasons stated in the slide before. It's shown that most of the sharks refused to go into the water that was more than 200 meters deep for more than 5 minutes, and spent most of their time swimming within waters that were 30 to 80 meters deep. This is because the resource and food-rich water is higher up on the continental shelf. Similarly, there are natural barriers that the sharks seem to be using as a guide for more food. Kelp forests, or this black blob over here, were present in the area while the sharks were being observed, and the pathing of sharks were interesting because they changed their course as the kelp forest borders changed. They would tend to stay a certain distance away from the forests, but remain close enough to use it as a catching feature. This could be due to many different reasons. California kelp forests have seen an increase in larger predators, such as great whites and orcas, so sharks would be wary of those, and of course juvenile sharks would not want to get eaten by their bigger cousins. It could also be that the kelp forests pose a different threat. Threshers have elongated tails that are known to be subject to entanglement. It's possible that the juvenile sharks learn to avoid it to not get caught and suffocate or drown. Another reason is because could be the sharks are being pushed farther up onto the shelf by commercial fishing. Fishing boats patrol the upwelling zones, trying to secure big catches. However, the other side of the upwell, the one that's closer to shore, isn't rigorously scouted. This gives young sharks and other creatures a safe place to grow and mature. Alternatively, it could genuinely just be down to the fact that sharks are scared of the kelp and what's beyond it. Juvenile animals have a certain hesitancy that they lose as they grow bigger and older, and juvenile threshers are usually only about 2 to 5 feet in length, nowhere near the biggest fish in the sea. As they feed on the nursery, growing bigger and more confident, they will eventually leave after 2 to 4 years to begin their migratory lives. While the experiment done for the Marine Ecology Progress Series seems quite similar to my proposed research, it has 3 key differences: size, species, and goals. The size of this experiment, while at first glance seems quite large, is actually medium in comparison to other projects, and it's certainly on the smaller scale when compared to the theoretical research. This research only took about 5 years to complete, while my research would take about 20 years. That's a substantial time difference. The second difference that is highlighted is that this research focused on common threshers, a smaller, more coastal species of Alopiidae. As stated before, the proposed research would focus on big eye threshers, so there's a difference in species. And finally, the highlighted research did not study threshers for reproductive purposes. They studied common threshers to analyze their swimming patterns around continental shelves and how they can protect those sharks while they mature. So they focused on conservation and just conservation, while my research would focus on conservation and reproduction. So, conducting research on sharks is a bit of a gray area when it comes to the support of the general public. There's a lot of misrepresentation of sharks in the media to this day. A lot of people are still deathly afraid of them. By doing this research and showing the public that these sharks are vulnerable and need to be protected, the public may become more empathetic towards these amazing creatures. Beyond that, the scientific community would heavily benefit from the research, even if the research did not give definitive answers to the questions being asked. Reproduction of sharks could potentially be witnessed, and even birthing could be witnessed. If these events are filmed or just witnessed in person, there could be a chance that the research tagged enough sharks to track where they're going. And so a future research team could look into those spots specifically and protect those spots so we can protect the species. Another question that was not the general aim of the research, but that could be potentially answered by this, is the evolutionary success of thresher sharks. By following and tagging them, we can have a peek into how well they've adapted and gets us a better look into their biology of their evolutionary path and how they got to their trademark caudal fins, or their very, very long tail fin. If the experiment does not bring back perfect results, we would still be able to observe the threshers and evaluate their evolutionary and biological prowess. And the third possibility, and the answer to the original question, we would find out, no matter what, how we could successfully protect these sharks without harming any other species or stressing the sharks. By studying the stretch of land observed, or stretch of water observed, we can find the most traveled paths of threshers and their general behavior around boats and unknown factors, such as tags or buoys. If the other two ideal outcomes of the project fail, this is the one that would be achieved no matter what. Threshers are already listed as a heavily threatened species by the IUCN. And by studying this stretch of land that they are known to travel, we can protect them from being caught in trawl lines since the zone would be dedicated to scientific research. Despite any outcome, at least one or more of the team's research questions would be answered. The last thing we have to keep in mind is that this research is purely theoretical for now. The plan I have created is not perfect, it's not foolproof, and it will continue to change over the years. However, I believe that the theme and the overall idea of the research is crucial. It needs to be done to protect these magnificent creatures. Sharks are a huge part of our ocean and our dependence on it. By doing research on them, protecting them, and appreciating them, we can further our own survival and further their own as well. Thank you.